Halloween, and why did my old Southern Baptist pal Delane Riles say that it was the high holy day in the church I pastored? Because of course he was right. And as I think all of you know, it is an ancient holiday, and like Christmas and others, it was Christianized from pagan or pre-Christian roots. Apparently Samhain, or however you say it, Samhain, as it looks, was a celebration and a welcome of the wandering spirits of the dead. They're not frightening, but they're sort of a visitation. And I think the Day of the Dead thing in Mexico is like that. Even though they wear these great masks and stuff and the skulls and all that, and they're sort of playing the role, I love that, playing the role of the dead. It's an impingement of the, not the netherworld, but the spirit world on the world of the living. And it was a sacred thing. The dead weren't, like we think of ghosts as demons, and so did many of the ancient world, like vampires were sometimes supposed to be ghosts. But these were more like Casper, I think. At the worst, like spooky, maybe, I don't know, in Harvey Comics. But this, and of course it becomes well, this is already an instance of what anthropologists call liminality, where you're right on the borderline or the cusp between two periods of your life, or two worlds, or two ages. And I think in Ephesians somewhere it says, so-and-so, so-and-so, us on whom the ends of the ages have come, which it sort of sounds like the one end and the other, and it's overlapping now. So liminality is extremely important in a lot of things, and well, especially in the Christianized version of Halloween, because the idea of it is it's the eve of All Saints' Day, and the perfect explanation for this is the visual one in Disney's Fantasia, where they're playing Night on Bald Mountain, and the demons and the skeletons. It's like the Monster Mash song, sort of. You know, they're whooping it up on Halloween, because as soon as the next day dawns, it's back into the crypt, back into the grave, etc. Because now the light of the sanctity of the saints, whatever, has dawned, and the demons, etc., have to beat it. It's a celebration of their last gasp, their last hurrah. And so that's all liminality, and that's why Halloween has all the marks of sacred liminality, including behavior that would not be acceptable any other time. Not necessarily destructive, but there is the whole mischief night thing. You're not egging houses and all that every day, or you're in jail. But here it's like, well, those kids, what the heck? And you sort of expect it, and you'd almost be disappointed if it didn't happen, the whole trick or treat thing. And so, yeah, and the costumes. Most folks wouldn't be dressing up like monsters, skeletons, witches, gypsies, any of this stuff during the rest of the week. Too bad, I might add. I remember seeing an African woman coming into a waiting room at a doctor's office, and she was wearing this gorgeous, multicolored robe and headdress, and I didn't know her, but I just blurted out, I said, "Ma'am, your costume is great. Please don't ever adapt to our boring looking clothes." And I don't remember what she said, probably call security or something. But there's, so all of that stuff is liminality, and that's built right into the whole idea of Halloween. And it was before it was called Halloween. Well, that has something also to do more specifically with the masks and costumes and the monsters. Because as I think Victor Turner showed in various books, he said that in rites of passage in many cultures, like from youth to adolescence, from adolescence to marriageability, and then funeral rites, vocational ordination rites, that it's thought that you're really dying and being reborn each time in a cultural sense, not in a biological sense, but your life is going to be entirely different than it used to be. And one reason I think things are screwed up in our society is that we have forgotten initiation rites and the whole idea of passage. Like my brother-in-law would take off his wedding ring when he would go out drinking with the guys. He shouldn't have done that. And why was he behaving that way after he was married? Because he didn't realize the rules had changed. He had become a different creature, sort of. Well, what they did in rites of passage was to use masks and totems and effigies of things that were half and half, like chimeras or whatever you call them. You would have half animal, half human, half God, half human, or different animals together, as in like in the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, with it had these horns and it had so many necks, and it had the hindquarters of a bear, but the claws of this and that. Well, or in the Testament of Solomon, a fascinating book of magic, when he sees one demon after another, it's got the same kind of weird one from column A, one from column B. And Turner said, well, that's because what you're doing is, like, you're right on the line between two types of being, the one you were until now and the one you're now becoming. And you are becoming the line. That's also why there are strange, to us, rituals like sub-incision, where a young male will have, circumcision is that ritual in some cultures, but sub-incision, they would cut a slit in the bottom of your penis to make it into a vagina, to make the man an embodiment of the two categories. He's now male and female in a symbolic sense. He's going over the category line, but he has become the category line, and so forth. So the masks symbolize that, this realm and the other, this age of your life and the next, they are converging and becoming one. I don't think anybody thinks that anymore with Halloween costumes and why monsters and all that, but that's where it comes from. Or if you look, there's a great book called The Philosophy of Horror, I can't think of the author's name, but he, I believe, entirely correctly says that all the classic monsters are cases of liminality because they're symbolizing the impingement of death or evil or whatever into the normal world, and there's an issue of ritual uncleanness. Like the dead are often, unclean ritually, and so you got to be real careful how you handle them and all that. And so, what is Dracula? He's not just like a guy that would sneak around and put you to sleep and withdraw your blood like a half transfusion and then steal it for some reason. Nobody makes movies about people like that. But Dracula is a dead man who is still alive by stealing your blood. Or the Frankenstein monster. He's not even one being, right? He's pieced together from dead folks, and he's brought back to life. That's not where he belongs. I remember I had a dream once years ago where I was at some sort of big dinner meeting, and I guess political correctness was already in the air. And here came a bunch of dinner guests who were dead. And I thought, they got to have their place at the table too. And now, wait just a minute, this is going too far. Well, yeah, my dream was about liminality. They're breaching the barrier that shouldn't be breached. The wolf man, what's he? Well, no dead in there, but he's half animal, half human. And then that gets into a whole different element of what is going on with masks and costumes. at these times. They're showing as Felix Unger once said, they're showing the real you that's underneath the other real you. That there is a shadow side of you, like Jung says, that must come out sooner or later. Your id, your desires, or possibly just your alter ego. It might be what you wish you were, though if somebody's dressing up as Freddy Krueger, I hope that's not the case. But even if it is, what you got here, switching over to Jung from Turner, he says, yeah, everybody's got the shadow side and the persona side. You were taught to try to embody the persona, to pick what Freud called an ego ideal. But what about the negative side, the dark side? Only knew the power of the dark side. Well, you gotta know it, because if you try to suppress it, as traditional perfectionistic religion tells you to, you gotta exorcise that stuff, you gotta mortify the flesh and all that. Well, you do have to control yourself. I mean, like it says in 1 Corinthians, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are expedient. I mean, some things just be stupid to do, even though you're free. Well, yeah, okay, if I'm going to live a productive life in a society, I better curb things. But you have to have some kind of a release. And because if you don't, you know what happens. Like these TV evangelists that accuse each other of being hypocrites, and turns out they are. But then the guy that accused them does the same thing on camera. I go, why? Like, I never thought of Jimmy Swaggart, for instance, as a hypocrite. I thought he was just borderline insane. That he had so I mean, that had nothing to do with his doctrine even, but he had compartmentalized things so much. He really thought he was on a higher level, but then whammo. And as Jung said, if you suppress this stuff, you are going to eventually project it onto others. And of course, Swagger did that with Jim Baker, and a lot of people do that. Oh, you're doing so-and-so, and then it turns out you are yourself, and you really didn't realize it. You were surprised, as surprised as anybody else. I don't know where that came from. That's not just an excuse. Yeah, that's right. You should have known, and you should have given the devil his due. Even if you have to dine with him with a long spoon, you have to somehow express it, hopefully in a harmless way, and that's what Halloween is. That's what going to horror movies is, etc. That, like Christopher Lee said, everybody in their heart has a secret fondness for the Prince of Darkness. Yeah, and you should let that out, or it's time to be Richard Ramirez. Right? You don't want that to happen, so you have to kind of feed it, and you have to know the boundaries. But that's okay. You need this occasional liminality, this mild and harmless way of going beyond the ordinary borders and boundaries. John and I are talking about comic books. I think another angle to the mask and costume business is as I intimated a minute ago, what you really would like to be or to do, and in which case it's like a superhero with a secret identity, that deep down you would like to be your version of Superman, just like Frodo is his version of Aragorn. His measly little guy, etc. Or Sam Gamgee in Lord of the Rings. He's the hero of the whole thing. Nobody else is. It's a humble old Sam, Mr. Frodo, and all that stuff. Yeah, that may be what it is. Your alter ego may be a fantasy, but it does say something about you and indicates what you would like to strive to do, and you should just do it on your level, whatever it is. So there's a whole lot to this kind of thing, because again, otherwise, why choose this costume? Of course, you might be stuck in one that your parents said, oh, isn't it cute? Like Ralphie, and I remember once my mother made my brother and I wear these red clown costumes. Oh, I didn't want to leave the house, but if you get to choose it, that says something about you. And especially kids that pick superhero costumes to wear. I mean, don't even need to explain that. That's just obvious what's going on there. Boy, I would like to be Batman, Superman, etc. And so I think that's, it doesn't really require any exposition, even though I'm given some. This is a rich vein, I think, the whole alternate identity and so on. Well, let's see. There's one other thing. This is kind of a jog into something else, but every October, my daughter Victoria and I watch at least one horror movie a day. And I'm up to 40 now for October. She's probably hit the same number. We were comparing notes last night. And I wrote something about this in my Zarathustra Speaks column a couple of years back. There are real issues of psychology and morality that are explored there. There's a whole bunch that are sort of the same sort of thing, like The Picture of Dorian Gray, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Wolf Man, I Was a Teenage Werewolf. That is a great and important movie there. It's about delinquency and what's really going on there. And this crazy, stupid shriek that says, well, the way to get it out of them is to let it all the way out. And if we do that with everybody, we can reduce the human race to total savagery and just start over. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. And so this guy becomes the guinea pig for it because he's very troubled and he starts fights at school and all that. And it turns out that once that is seduced out of him by the therapy and the drugs, he's a werewolf and people are dying. Well, yeah, that's also the largely tedious current season of American Horror Story is sort of about that Mr. Jingles, a serial killer, wouldn't have been one had not these well-meaning shrinks, or Psycho 2 by Robert Bloch. They figure they can get Norman Bates all the way back to normal by encouraging him to I forget what now, but to relive the whole thing, and he does, literally, real stupid. And so there's this, there's that issue that is so well handled there, but there are other ones too, and I think one of the most profound is in the Frankenstein movies, when you compare the Universal versions with Henry Frankenstein. It's not science, it's more like black magic. I love that guy. You compare that to the Peter Cushing, Victor Frankenstein in Hammer films. In the Universals, Dr. Frankenstein realizes he's taken a big risk and wants to back off. He's seen enough after the events of the first movie, but Dr. Pretorius, oh, what a great character. He sort of threatens and bamboozles him into creating the Bride of Frankenstein. And again, terrible mistake, and involves violence Frankenstein doesn't even know about. But he's like Mary Shelley subtitled the book "The Modern Prometheus." Like, maybe you shouldn't. Why don't you leave this one alone and leave it to God or whatever? Well, in the Hammer ones, Frankenstein is like Mengele. He's like a concentration camp scientist, and he seems to have no scruples of any kind. And yet he becomes sympathetic in these scenes where these village idiots are after him with the hose and the torches and all that. And those fools, why can't they see we're trying to advance science? And you have sympathy because, yeah, that is happening. This is a great portrait of that. You get Galileo and Copernicus and all that. But on the other hand, the villagers are right. Because nothing stops this guy, anything in the name of science. And so what do you do with that? I mean, it comes up all the time with cloning. Should we do that? And genetic engineering, should we do that? have never pretended to know the answer to that, but those movies just perfectly raise this issue. I could go on with Star Trek episodes and do this. Oh, speaking of that, yeah, one last thing.
You will go on with it.
Yeah. There's this, about the not trying to stamp out the dark side. There is, we've already seen how in a sort of Jungian framework, you don't want to do that because it will explode outward or at least seep outward and you're accusing others of what you've done. But there's something in Jewish wisdom, the teaching of the rabbis, that I think is another application of this. They believe not exactly in original sin, but in the evil and good inclinations, that everybody is born with the good inclination to do good and to be good, but somewhere along the line as you enter adolescence, you are given the evil yetzer, or the evil inclination. So you're this is just like, you know, the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, and great image for that. And so it's up to you. You are responsible for what you do, but you can always overcome the temptation. Well, Jewish mysticism, like all mysticism, talks about purification or purgation, that to be closer to God, you want to see if you can eradicate the evil and the sin nature. Well, the rabbi said, let's not be too quick about that, because let's wait till the kingdom of God comes, the perfect millennial era. Because in this era we're now living in, there are Nazis and fascists and invaders. It's sort of tragic to have to shoot those people, or you're going to put so-and-so criminal behind bars for decades? Ooh, that's cruel. And the rabbi said, yeah, it sure is. And to resolve to punish or execute, that is regrettable, but you got to do it, or you will become worse than them. Not by intent, but by effect. And so let's not be too hasty to become perfect. And you see this in the Star Trek episode where they have a transporter malfunction and Kirk splits into the good Kirk and the bad Kirk. And suddenly the Klingons are on the way, and the good Kirk lacks the spine to do anything about it. Captain, the Klingon battle cruiser is headed our way with shields up. Well, Mr. Spock, you think maybe we could get rid of him with a spray of marshmallows with a captain? And they have to have the cruelty of Kirk to save them from the greater cruelty of the Klingons and so forth. That has always stuck with me. Martin Luther said that the executioner is the left hand of God. It's not a proper task for Christians, but it's got to be done. I mean, you're right to regret it. You're right to see an inconsistency between thou shalt not kill and this, but you've got to stop the mad dogs or you're enabling them. And so I mention that because it strikes me that this whole idea of giving the dark side its due is very important in psychology with the individual and with political ethics and so forth. And it's shown nowhere better than in horror. So it seems to me Halloween, or any celebration, sort of Halloween all year round in my house, but that's holy and horrific, because that's the way reality is.